All right, we're going to get into the strategy behind what makes a brand stick in your mind. A lot of the thinking here is based on the fantastic work of Alexander Chernev in his book Strategic Brand Management.
Exactly. We're really talking about the DNA of a brand, the names, the logos, all those little signals that companies build to stake out a claim in our brains. It's not just about looking good, it's about the deep strategy that makes a brand instantly and powerfully recognizable.
So, let's start with the basics. Brand identifiers are, the whole arsenal of things a company creates and owns to set itself apart. And as you can see, the list is long. You've got mottos, characters, packaging, even sounds.
It's a huge list for sure, but for pretty much any company out there, the entire identity system really rests on two main pillars, the brand name and the brand logo. Everything else, it tends to circle back and support those two. So it makes sense to start with the name, because that's usually the first huge permanent decision a company makes.
The name really is the anchor, isn't it? It's the one thing that everything else, the logo, the ads, the products, has to connect back to. It's the constant.
100%. And that is exactly why the origin of that name, the strategic thinking behind where it comes from, is one of the most critical decisions a founder or a leadership team can make. It really sets the entire tone for everything that comes after.
So one of the most classic ways to go, and probably the default for a lot of new businesses, is just naming the company after the person who started it. Think Dell, Ford, or as we see here, Disney and Ferrari. It's a very straightforward, traditional path.
It is, and it accomplishes something really powerful right from the get-go. It immediately attaches a human story, a sense of personal responsibility to the brand. When you hear a name like Gillette, you're not just thinking about a razor. You're subconsciously connecting it to a real person's legacy and their implied promise of quality. It just feels more personal than calling it, Blade Co.
Okay, then you have an approach that's basically the complete opposite. Just be purely descriptive. With a name like Toys R Us or Wonderful Pistachios, there is absolutely zero confusion about what you're going to get.
Exactly. This strategy is all about making clarity the #1 priority. The value proposition is literally baked right into the name. And in a really crowded market, that kind of instant, oh, I get it, can be a huge advantage. You don't have to burn through your marketing budget just explaining what you do. Now, this next category, evocative names, this is where it gets a bit more metaphorical and, honestly, I think a lot more interesting from a branding perspective. These names don't literally describe the product at all. Right. What they do is suggest a quality or an experience. Nike is the perfect case study. They don't sell victory in a box, but by naming the company after the Greek goddess of victory, they evoke that powerful feeling. It requires the customer to make a small mental leap, and that little act of connecting the dots can forge a much stronger, more emotional bond with the brand.
Post-A, and the final route you can take is to just make up a word. A fabricated name, sometimes called a fanciful name, like Kodak or Xerox, gives you a totally blank slate. There are no preconceived notions, no baggage, no prior meanings in any language. But that is a classic double-edged sword. The huge challenge is that these names mean absolutely nothing on their own. We're told here that Verizon comes from the Latin veritas for truth and horizon, but seriously, who knows that? It means you have to pour a tremendous amount of money and time into just teaching people what your name is and what it stands for.
And that whole idea of a blank slate name leads us perfectly into the really critical business end of this conversation, legal protection. Yes, this is key. Because it's one thing to come up with a name that sounds cool or feels right, but from a business point of view, you have to be able to legally own it and defend it from competitors who will, inevitably, try to sound like you if you're successful. This spectrum here, honestly, every entrepreneur or brand manager should have this tattooed on their arm. It lays out the different types of names based on how legally defensible they are. And right at the top, with the absolute strongest protection, you've got fanciful names.
Right, those are the completely made-up words we were just talking about. Kodak, Xerox. You get the best trademark protection for those because they literally have no other meaning except for your brand. Just below that, also very strong, are arbitrary names. These are real words, but used in a context that has nothing to do with their meaning, like Apple for computers. But look what happens as you go down the list. The legal protection gets weaker and weaker. Suggestive names like Greyhound, which hints at speed, or Coppertone, which hints at tanning, they only get moderate protection. And then you land on descriptive names like Whole Foods or the Weather Channel. These are incredibly hard to defend because you're trying to own common words that just describe the product category. And then at the very bottom, with literally zero protection, are generic names. You just can't trademark the word soap for a company that sells soap. It belongs to the public. End of story.
So it all comes down to this really fundamental strategic trade-off. On one side of the scale, you have a descriptive name. Let's say Fresh Juice Company.
Super easy for customers to get it. You know exactly what they sell. There is zero confusion. But as we just saw, it's legally very weak. It's tough to protect, and it's easy for competitors to create names that sound almost identical.
And then on the complete other side, you've got a fanciful name like Xerox. Legally, it's a fortress. It's almost impossible for a competitor to copy, but it took a fortune and decades of marketing to teach the entire planet what Xerox even was.
Right. And finding that sweet spot on the spectrum for your specific business, balancing that immediate clarity against that long-term legal security, that is the real strategic challenge when it comes to naming a brand.
Okay, so we've spent a good amount of time on the name. Now let's switch gears to its partner in crime, the logo. I love this way of thinking about it. If the name is the anchor that holds the brand down, the logo is the flag you're flying. It's that immediate visual symbol that tells everyone on the battlefield of the market exactly who you are.
And just like with names, there are different strategic approaches to logos. It's not just about picking a picture that looks nice. There's real thought behind it.
That's right. Pretty much every logo you encounter can be sorted into one of these 5 main categories, and each one is usually chosen for a very specific business reason.
You can basically split the main types into 2 big camps. On one side, you've got logos that are all about typography. The wordmark is the most direct of all. It's just the full company name in a stylized font, like Google or Coca-Cola. It leaves absolutely nothing to chance.
And a letter form is like a super condensed version of that, using one powerful initial to stand for the whole brand. The golden arches for McDonald's M or the H for Honda. They're perfect examples. Simple, they work at any size, and they become iconic over time.
Okay, then on the other side of that coin, you have image-based logos. Pictorial marks are literal pictures of a thing. Shell uses a seashell. Apple uses an apple. It creates a very simple, direct mental link.
But abstract marks, that's where it gets really interesting again. These are invented shapes, like the Nike swoosh. They don't have any meaning at first, and that means, just like with a fanciful name, they are totally unique and legally very strong. But they also require that same heavy investment to teach people what that shape is supposed to mean.
And the 5th and final type is the emblem. This one's a bit more complex. It's where the brand name is usually contained inside of a symbol, like a crest or a badge. Yeah, think about university seals, the NFL shield, or the Harley-Davidson logo. These are intentionally designed to make you feel a sense of heritage, authority, and tradition. They just feel official, and that's a very powerful message for certain brands to communicate.
So, no matter which of those 5 types a brand decides to go with, wordmark, abstract, whatever, the actual design of the logo boils down to a mix of these 3 core ingredients.
That's it. Typography, color, and symbols. These are the fundamental atoms that every designer uses to build the molecule of a logo. Let's just quickly break down how each one works strategically.
First up, typography. The best way to think about a font is that it's the personality or the voice of the brand, just in visual form. This slide is the perfect way to see that in action. The whimsical, almost magical script of the Disney logo instantly screams fantasy, fun, and storytelling. Now, just for a second, imagine that same Disney logo written in the heavy, stable, no-nonsense font that FedEx uses. It would feel completely wrong, right? That FedEx typeface is designed on purpose to communicate efficiency, seriousness, and reliability. The font choice itself is a strategic message.
Next is color. And color might be the most immediate and emotionally visceral identifier a brand can have. It hits your brain before you can even read the name.
And it's wild how strong that link can get. Some brands own a color so completely that the color practically becomes a synonym for the brand itself. When you say UPS brown, you're not just describing a shade, you're thinking of reliability and logistics.
Or Tiffany blue. That connection is so critical to their brand that Tiffany & Co. actually has that specific shade of blue trademarked. It legally is their brand in many ways. That is an incredibly valuable business asset.
And this last element, symbols, this is all about creating a powerful visual shorthand for a big idea, a core promise or attribute of the brand.
It's just such a smart communication shortcut. Prudential wants to communicate stability, security, permanence. So instead of writing a long sentence about it, they just show you the Rock of Gibraltar. The symbol does all the talking for them.
It's the exact same play Rolex is running. They want to communicate luxury, being the best, the king of watches, so what do they show you? A crown. It is an unbelievably efficient and powerful way to communicate a really complex idea in a single memorable picture.
But the truly great logos, the ones that become iconic, often have one more layer to them. They go a step further and hide meaning in these clever, subtle ways that kind of reward you for looking a little closer.
Right, it's like they have these little secrets hidden right out in the open.
The FedEx logo is probably the most famous example of this in the world.
People can see this logo hundreds of times and never notice the hidden piece. So I'll just ask everyone watching directly. Can you find the hidden arrow? There it is. It's made by the negative space, the white space between the capital E and the X. And the thing is, once you see it, you can never, ever unsee it again. And the absolutely brilliant part is that it's not just some clever visual trick for designers, it is pure strategy made visible. That arrow powerfully reinforces everything FedEx stands for: forward momentum, speed, direction, precision. It communicates their entire value proposition without using a single extra word. It's just genius. And once you know to look for this kind of thing, you start seeing it everywhere. In the Amazon logo, that smile is also an arrow that points from A to Z, which is meant to signify that they sell everything from A to Z.
Or in the Tostitos logo, the two T's in the middle are actually designed to look like two people dipping a chip into the bowl of salsa sitting on top of the letter I. It's all about sharing and having a good time.
The pink parts of the Baskin-Robbins logo cleverly form the number 31, which is a direct nod to their famous promise of having 31 flavors, one for every day of the month.
And a personal favorite of mine, in the Tour de France logo, the R in Tour is shaped to look like a cyclist leaning over their bike, and the yellow circle is the front wheel. It's just a fantastic way to embed the entire story of the event right into the mark itself.
Which really brings us all the way back to the central, most important question that ties all of this together. This whole topic, from names to logos, really just comes down to one fundamental strategic choice. When you're building a brand's identity, what are you optimizing for? Are you building it to be easily and immediately understood, with a descriptive name and a literal pictorial logo? Or are you building it to last? Are you creating a legally defensible, totally unique asset with a fanciful name and an abstract mark that you know you're going to have to invest a lot of time and money in to teach the world what it means? You know, there's no single right answer that works for every company. But the path you decide to take between those two extremes will define your brand's journey, its biggest challenges, and its greatest opportunities, right from day one.